Writing a PhD thesis is often the first major challenge in a young scholar's academic career. For many candidates, it means learning to carry out independent research over an extended period of time without the help of a pre-established course curriculum. As a consequence, they frequently struggle with issues such as time and resource management. In addition, doctoral students must attempt to find a balance between the new requirements of their personal and academic lives, both of which will generally have come to include greater responsibilities. These may extend from having to fulfill teaching or administrative assignments at their institute or faculty, to making important life decisions such as taking on a side job, moving to a new city or country, or perhaps even forming a family. As if this were not enough, PhD candidates frequently encounter unexpected difficulties and setbacks that affect the progression of their research. As a result, they often find themselves dealing with issues such as self-doubt, lack of motivation, and a general feeling of being isolated from the quote-unquote outside world. All of this means that the relationship between candidates and their supervisors plays a crucial role in ensuring a positive outcome to the endeavor of crafting a PhD thesis. Now, while we might all know a horror story or two about problematic relationships between candidates and supervisors, we often fail to pay attention to the opposite, cases in which such relationships are particularly fruitful or prolific. With this in mind, the Graduate Academy and the Heidelberg Graduate School for the Humanities and Social Sciences announced a creative writing contest in the spring of 2020, inviting doctoral candidates to share their positive experience of doctoral supervision. The contest results were announced in the summer of 2020, and the Graduate Academy recently published the selected text both in print and in digital form. To complement the publication, we decided to sit down with some of the authors and discuss their submissions as well as their personal thoughts and experiences as PhD students at Heidelberg University. We believe these stories and insights may be of benefit both to prospective as well as current PhD students in order to help them make the most out of this crucial stage in their academic careers. My name is David Jara. I'm the coordinator of the text production and writing support services of Heidelberg University's Graduate Academy. Welcome to the second episode of Supervision, Successful PhD Partnerships and Where to Find Them. Sorry. Just a quick side note before we begin. This podcast episode was recorded back in early March 2021, right as many of the ongoing restrictions related to the pandemic were being lifted here in Germany. Luckily, a lot of the COVID-related issues we talked about have changed in the meantime. Nevertheless, we still decided to keep rather than edit out the ensuing discussion. We believe it is an important document as it reflects how a young generation of academics lived through a time of global crisis and change. We hope you enjoyed the episode. First of all, welcome Hannah, welcome Ulrike. Thank you guys for being here at the Graduate Academy in person. That's something that we're all really happy to be able to do, slowly, again, meeting people face to face and not just on their screens. I will begin by asking you a couple of questions and asking you guys to introduce yourselves and a bit of your research. Maybe you want to begin, Hannah?
Yes, of course. Thank you for inviting us, and I'm very glad to see you in person, as you already mentioned. My name is Hannah, I'm 26, and I'm a PhD candidate for German medieval philology. And I already studied here at Heidelberg with a break of, no, it was less than a break, it was more than an exchange in Italy for 2 semesters, and I'm recently coming back from an exchange in Switzerland. So even if you study German philology, you can still travel the world somehow a little bit.
Sounds exciting.
Yes, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Great, thank you. And what about you, Ulrike? We know each other personally for some time, but maybe you can let our listeners know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Ulrike. I came to Heidelberg 2014 for my master's already in English studies, which I completed in 2017. And then there was a year of, I don't know what I want to do, until I decided to start a PhD here as well in American studies officially, but it's my supervisor is at the English department. I'm 30 years old, since you mentioned your age.
I would also like to ask you maybe to tell us a bit of your current standing in terms of your PhD research. So what is going on right now? How are you coming along? I know from our talks with each other that you're looking to reaching the end of this journey sometime soon. So tell us a bit about that.
Looking forward to it, yes. I'm 6 months from handing it in. Christmas, just 2 days before Christmas, I'll be handing in my thesis. And as you just said, I'm very much looking forward to it. It's been stressful, to put it lightly. Most of all the last year. People always think, it's Corona, so much time, you have nothing else to do anyways. It's not like that at all. At least it wasn't for me. I couldn't concentrate anymore. I mean, you've seen me here, like having a little breakdown a couple of months ago, because it was everything was just not perfect.
I think we all went through this in this pandemic.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, last year in April when I wrote this text as well, it was still, everything was new. There was this virus and everyone was just like, okay, let's just see. I'm at home. I don't have anything to do. So that was still fine. And the summer was okay. But this hugely long lockdown now that we had over autumn, winter, that was just too much. And I've seen it in many friends as well, PhD, doctoral candidates as well, who just couldn't cope with that too much, but it wasn't good. It wasn't a good time for anyone that I know.
Do you feel this kind of like messed up your time schedule, your plan?
Yes,
okay,
definitely.
so you're kind of like fighting to keep with your own deadline, your own set deadline for...
The deadline is set, that's the thing. I'm fighting with quality management right now and quantity management. I'm not at a point where I thought I would be in summer 2021. I do have some headlines here and there, and it all needs to come together.
You're doing your best to put things together and try to make that
exactly.
deadline. That's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing to do, to like try to stick with your deadlines. And I can say that because I kind of like did not stick to a couple of mine.
You really did not.
But what about you, Hannah?
Yeah, isn't it calming to hear that?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I'm doing my PhD with the Sonderforschungsbereich. So we are collaborating from different faculties and different disciplines. And I know a lot of PhD candidates, and it's always very calming to hear that everyone is literally struggling with the same things. So a lack of time. And I totally agree with you when you said that during the COVID pandemic, everyone's like, oh, if you got so much time, a lot of things were canceled. Yes, but time is running. And finding your own structure in a time where there's no structure at all is so difficult. So I totally agree with your experiences because I made the same ones. And I think it's important to know for all these PhD candidates listening out there that you are not alone. No matter how you feel, these struggles, these problems, these fears, we all share the same experiences, different. Some people share it more, some people share it less. But from all the people I know, there have been some ups and downs during this time.
More downs than ups.
But somehow you can manage to do it if you can ask for help. You can search groups where you can talk about these things. Like it doesn't have to be a supervisor. Sometimes it's helpful if you find someone, another PhD candidate who experiences the same things. And referring to your text, which made me laugh so much, I felt like, oh my God, girl, that's so me. I can understand it. And I would have loved to share these Wednesday afternoons with Netflix and wine in bed with you, like together in despair. I would have loved that, really.
Absolutely. I think though, what's interesting though, and I guess it's a pity that from that perspective, we're relatively like a homogeneous group here because all of us were humanities scholars.
Yes.
And it would be really interesting to hear, and I'll have the chance to do this with a couple of the other contest participants at a later time, but it would be interesting to hear how people from the natural sciences, for example, or from other fields of research dealt with the pandemic, because obviously I think probably people in the humanities are more at risk of the pandemic situation from the perspective that our challenges are always related to kind of like self-structuring, creating your own times and spaces to write, to do things. And so, as you said, I think that's a good point. It's like suddenly you don't even have like the university as a structuring element, and you're at home alone, which is one of the most difficult places for some people to actually concentrate and work correctly.
Yes, that's very interesting, because I think some of my colleagues and me personally, we had problems with closed libraries and closed archives, and for others it was difficult because they couldn't travel for explorations. But I also know people that they couldn't continue with their experiments because of the closed labs. So they had to stop the experiment literally in the middle of it and couldn't continue. So they had to restart it, which costs a lot of money and a lot of time and makes things even harder. So I think somehow everyone personally and also job related had some difficulties with this pandemic, I think.
Absolutely. This is great. We're kind of like jumping ahead of my question list, but it's not a problem. I think obviously nowadays the situation with the pandemic is something that we're going to touch this topic at several points probably during our conversation. But maybe again a bit more specifically to your situation right now. So, what is your current situation in terms of your research, and how far advanced are you, or what are you looking ahead to accomplishing?
Yeah, I already mentioned that I'm working within and for an SFB, Sonderforschungsbereich.
Would you like to explain really briefly to people who might not be at the Heidelberg University what is an SFB is?
So an SFB, ein Sonderforschungsbereich, is a collaboration supported by the DFG, where several people from different disciplines work together on a bigger subject. So in my personal case, it's the material text culture. So all of us, we're working on projects where before the print time, written artifacts are analyzed, let's say it like that. And this means that also my deadline is already fixed, because this SFB will finish in June 2023. So I would say I'm in the middle of my project, let's call it like that. Right. Yes, I recently had a time to write a lot, to produce a lot of pages during my stay in Zurich, Switzerland. Okay. And I concentrated on the medieval texts, the novels so far, and now in my next step I'm reading all this academic literature and add these things to my personal and individual analyses and interpretations. So I was traveling through time during my recent research, which is a lot of fun, and it was great to do that, and had the chance to do that somehow isolated and very productive.
Very nice. So from what I understand, then what you do is a lot traveling back in time, right?
Yes, exactly.
But the next question, that's very, very good, because the next question is more about traveling forward in time. And I would like to know, how do you see yourself once you finish? What do you plan to follow up with? I'm sorry, because I know this is something that...
People love this question.
Exactly.
Yeah?
And it's something that in the humanities and when you're doing a PhD for a kind of like extended period of time, people ask this.
Yes, of course. This is a very important and often asked question, like frequently asked question. And I would love to stay in academia, honestly, because I love what I'm doing. And especially I love the fact that not to show off what you already know, but to figure out every single day that there are so many things that you just don't know yet. So this is what really excites me and what motivates me. But let's say that the academic system is not the easiest one to stay in and to see a future for yourself in. So referring to hashtag Ich bin Hanna, it's not something that I only mention because my name is Hanna, but also because I really relate to these problems.
Absolutely.
And so for myself, I try to stay as open-minded as possible and as flexible as possible.
Right.
Which is difficult, let's say, from a personal or private point of view, because I would not be flexible from moving to another city, since I recently have built our own apartment and decided to stay here since we are both living here. And we're born here and we're very connected.
You are an original Heidelberg citizen.
I prefer to say I'm born in Heidelberg, but I'm an Aborigines from Dossenheim. So
Dossenheim, oh wow, okay.
So we're very much connected to our homeland, let's call it like that. But being open-minded, being flexible, seeing what's coming and try to find out what you love doing. And I think especially coming from social sciences and humanities, we learn every day so many different things, more than our specific topic of our PhD. And let's see what kind of door will open itself or will be opened next.
Right. Wow, great. How do you see things?
Completely opposite.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. I notice now really that I don't want to stay in academia at all. Hashtag, yeah, ich bin Hanna. But not just because of that. What you find interesting, knowing there's so much out there still, for me, it's just, I get the feeling that it's too overwhelming. It's just because I have problems sometimes with just sorting things out. And just being like, okay, no, I will stop here now and make a line and just take what I have already. So it's just, I think that's also why I sometimes have trouble still just opening my document and being like, okay, I'm going to focus on this now, because I just get distracted from so many different thoughts and ideas. And so I noticed it's been fun still, no matter what, it's been fun, like academia. I love the student lifestyle. That's one of the bigger reasons I did my PhD, because after my master's I was like, do I want to work? I do not. So like properly, I mean, I work already now at the Graduate Academy. That's how David and I know each other. And I've noticed that this kind of work actually makes, I have more fun doing what I do at the Graduate Academy than what I do in my PhD. So this kind of work, like working with students and PhD students in particular, I'm actually already somewhat applying now to other universities for open positions that are coming up now, because also, complete opposite of you, I don't come from Heidelberg, I come from the Northeast, and I'm very much looking forward to moving away again now. So I'm just trying to figure out what's next. First, when I saw on my PhD agreement that someone sat there signing it 2018 on December 22nd, which was a Saturday, I was like, who is this person who works the Saturday before Christmas signing my PhD agreement? I wanted to have some more weeks, time. That's why I handed it in just before Christmas, because I thought, I'm going to have my signature by the end of January.
Right.
And then by mid-January, I get the email, you can pick it up now. No, that's not what I wanted. But now I'm really glad, actually, that somebody did sign it just before Christmas, because that means that this year, Christmas, it will all be done, and I can just get ridiculously drunk for days on end. I can already feel almost the weight dropping off me once it's just handed in, given over.
I think it's really interesting that to have you guys these very opposite perspectives, and at the same time, I think I can relate totally to both of you, because I've gone through both phases. So I really loved what I did during my dissertation, and what Hannah was saying about the phase of discovery, of having this feeling that you're making new connections, that you're bringing things together that are there and been hanging there, and then suddenly you are starting to make sense of them. I think that was the most exciting part all of the time during the research phase. I think in my case, I took a very long time to get my dissertation done, and the problem was that at some point I lost that initial excitement. And at some point I also started working at the Graduate Academy, doing things that were related to academia but were not in the research field, and having the feeling that I would like to apply more of what I learned rather than just learn about it. So I can completely relate to both perspectives, and I think that's a very natural kind of like development that happens, and it's a good thing that it does happen, because obviously, unfortunately, there aren't enough places in the academia, at least in Germany, for all of us to like be working. Maybe things would be different if there were more chances, and I think that's a completely different discussion. I'm not going to go very deeply into it, but I think it probably one of the things that would maybe make us more unified in our responses would be knowing that the chances are out there, and it's not always a thing about just hoping for that one spot that might mean that you can make it in the academy. But yeah, exactly, absolutely.
And the more funding you have, then you wouldn't have to work. So you could just you would have all your time to concentrate on your PhD. What I meant with like what you talked about before, that you like discovering everything, something new every day. I'm looking at ritualistic performances and aspects in North American utopian, dystopian, feminist fiction. So it's an interdisciplinary approach for once. And anthropology, I've never done anything like in that kind of field before. So I had to do a lot of research in the first year. Just, what are rituals? What are ritualistic performances? How has it changed? How is it, what can I find in the novels and so on? And it's just every day, it's like, oh yeah, there's a new book, and oh, there's a different book, and there's another aspect to that. And it's just, where do you go? Where do you stop? Where do you draw the line? And then it never feels complete. That's for me the problem.
No, absolutely interesting topics. I'm just going to ask us to move a little bit forward in the in my questionnaire, because if not, our time is going to run out. But I think I probably have already come up with several topics for further podcasts that I might invite you guys over for, and we can discuss at a later time. But yeah, for now, I would like to move on a bit to the topic of the writing contest itself. Which is the reason that we're having this podcast. Both of you submitted text to this call, and Hannah, well, you were granted the first prize.
Yes, thank you.
and Ulrike and a couple of other doctoral students had also great submissions that were also awarded prizes. And beyond that fact, my first question to both of you in turn would be, what motivated you guys to submit an entry to the call?
Yes, I think it was the best way to procrastinate during this last year. And it was a lot of fun because I love creative writing. I already loved it in high school and I still love it. But writing, if writing is your job, creative writing, let's say, doesn't have so much space in your personal life anymore, so it changes a little bit. And I saw this as an opportunity to write again, to creatively write again. And I had these thoughts in my mind, and I love to spend this day, instead of working on my PhD, working on that poem. And it was great because this is also an advice for everyone doing a PhD. Sometimes you need to step away, do a step back from your own project, do something completely different. Doesn't mean that you have to write poems. You can also just watch Netflix, go outside for a walk, do some sport, whatever you're doing to free your mind, and then work on your texts again, because sometimes the tunnel is too dark and it's too long, and you need to concentrate on something else, and the contest was perfectly worked perfectly for that. And so I really enjoyed doing it, and that's a way to procrastinate.
Great. And at the same time to as you say, to like free your mind. I think that's a really good point. That I also had a lot of moments throughout my dissertation writing process where doing something else actually unblocked some kind of thought construct in my head, so I can relate to that. What about you, Uli?
Well, I love creative writing as well. That's like, so when I saw that you do this contest, I was like, oh yeah, don't have anything to do. Well, I do, but you do, but you don't. So yeah, I loved it in school, back in school already as well, but I hated, which I still do, to read it out to people. And because we were given the option of publishing it anonymously, I was really, really considering doing that. But then I was like, no, come on, it's bullshit. Just man up to what you wrote, woman up.
Woman up.
Yes.
So
female empowerment.
Exactly. I'm still dreading it now that I have to read it out. So yeah, that's why I wrote it. And also, I mean, the situation I'm describing in the text, it just happened basically. So I wrote it, I think it was April last year, when I had this epiphany, which is very basic epiphany, to just talk to your supervisor when you have a problem. It's groundbreaking once you come to that conclusion.
But it's not so self-evident. I think I'll come to that. I think I'll come to that when we talk about your text. But I think it sounds kind of like almost basic. Yes. Exactly, when you say that way. And I think we'll discuss this later. But I think it's definitely not something that is always taken for granted.
Yeah.
Okay, so. You said you hadn't had much of a chance to read the other entries. What about you, Hannah? Did you? Because one of my questions would be if you had a chance to have a look at them and what you thought. Were there any topics that stood out that you think were interesting, or other perspectives, or something that you could relate to?
Yes. So you sent the brochure to us, and I had the chance to read them. And for me, I already knew that before. But it made me realize even more how lucky I am that I'm a PhD candidate of this Sonderforschungsbereich, because I don't have to worry about funding.
Right.
And this is maybe the biggest flex that we can give to you or offers you. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I have, there was this article that it takes a village to help you through your PhD. And this is something I also try to stress in my poem, that there is a supervisor, but there are, how I call them, Doktorgeschwister, so other doctoral candidates, sisters and brothers who go through you with that, and friends, and for me especially my family, who supports me so much and helps me when I'm struggling. And this is something I figured out reading these texts, that you are not alone with your struggles, as we already mentioned at the beginning today. And yeah, I really loved, really had to laugh a lot reading yours, Uli. And I recently read a tweet, and it says that doing a PhD is a weird time because most people think you're an overachiever, but you feel like a complete imposter who is getting nowhere. And it has so many likes and retweets, and reading yours with your ups and downs, and what a hell of a ride. Yeah. And I completely agree, and I felt so understood reading these texts. So I really hope that a lot of people out there read these texts and do not feel as alone as they can during a PhD time, and especially doing a PhD time in a pandemic.
Well, then you almost automatically switched over to the next question. We've talked in general about challenges that doctoral students have gone through during the pandemic. But what were your experience, maybe your personal experience in terms of supervision? So how have you been communicating with your supervisors? And do you think that there's any kind of like change in the dynamic, and in general, if that's an additional point where people have had trouble in the last year or so?
Well, it hasn't really changed to pre-pandemic times, I have to say. Well, the only thing that did change was that we don't meet in person anymore, but online, because she also doesn't live in Heidelberg, she lives in Mainz, and so she's not at the institute anymore regularly, so it's just switched to online. We do not have all that much contact, which is fine for me. She checks in from time to time to see how it's going. But she's really, really busy as well, which I think is also due to academia in general and how it works, because she's not a professor, she's a PD, like Privatdozentin, and has a shitload of work to do anyways. So keeping in touch constantly with her PhDs. I don't know if she probably does have other PhD students as well, but I don't know how many. Whenever I do text her, I get reply quite quickly, and she answers my questions. So that's fine. If I were to reach out more, I'm pretty sure I would get reactions straight away.
So in your experience, the pandemic in itself hasn't changed that much your personal dynamic, which was mostly based on maybe writing emails and not necessarily like face-to-face communication.
Exactly.
What about you, Hannah? Do you tend to see your supervisor personally on a regular basis, or is it also more or less virtual communication?
Yes, it's virtual communication to several reasons. It's due to pandemic, but also because my supervisor founded a family, and so which is very hard in academia. So this is something I really do support, that people try to break these strict, let's say, rules or difficulties and try to make it different. And so we do not meet on a regular basis, which is fine for me as well, because that's a fact that I love about academia, that you can work autonomously, and this is something that it works for me, because I'm self-disciplined and it works well for me. But I would suggest everyone to communicate as open and free as possible. And this sounds so easy, and it's so difficult. Because I think it is also a problem of the system, but in German academia, the person who corrects your dissertation at the end is also your mentor. So sometimes it's difficult to reach out to that person. Absolutely. If you have problems or insecurities.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I would suggest to talk about this with your supervisor, and if that's not possible, to find other context. For example, the Graduate Academy. There are a lot of...
Thank you for the plug. Yes, I totally agree with that.
That's a little ad, so hashtag advertisement, you know. No, but that works for us. It's also the SFB who offers a lot of help and communication. You can have these thesis advisory committees, these TACs, which are offered by the faculties, where you can find other professors or other people working in academia to help you out in some situations. And I think this can be very, very helpful. And it doesn't have to be a duo, it doesn't have to be a solo. You can still find other people to help you and do that.
That's a great point. And I think, again, we're going to come to some similar points later on. But basically, kind of like what you're talking about is like not putting all of your expectations on your supervisor at the same time as like a supervising instance, but like looking actively as well for other points of support and trying to like, again, we'll connect this with Uli's topic about looking for help as a doctoral candidate.
Yes, and especially as you mentioned, Uli, for these people, for these supervisors, we are not the only to-do point in their life.
Right. Peace.
Yes, and so you have to consider that, and maybe that you have to consider that especially for your own expectations for starting a PhD program, I would say, or a PhD project. Yeah,
absolutely. And I would like to connect this actually with this is just a question that I was thinking about last night, but I think it connects very well also with something that you implicitly were addressing in what you said. My question would be to you guys: how uncommon or common do you guys think good PhD supervision experiences are actually?
Well, from what I've seen and heard from friends, mostly in the humanities, they are in the same situation as I am, and you probably as well, from what I could gather now, that supervision it's there, but you have to ask for it. It's not, they won't, you know, as you already said, you're not a priority. You're not even close to being a priority for them, I think, because academia is just so demanding. You are just one little piece in their overall workday. So you have to make yourself heard, I think, if you really need help. And I think I've been lucky that my supervisor does help and get back to me as soon as I write her an email, like 2-3 days later at the latest, I have a reply. I have friends as well who write their supervisors, and if they're lucky, they have a reply in 2 weeks' time. So if even that's, you see, and then you write again. It's like, hey, I wrote you an email 3 weeks ago. Did you get it? How about it? And if it's something important, like, what do you do? Most of all now with the pandemic, you can't just go to their office and be like, hello, I'm being obnoxious now and coming to your office. And in nature science, I have some friends. I have the feeling it's usually different because the groups are like from what I've seen, from what I know from friends, it's that they have very small work groups with one supervisor, and he has those or she has those, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 PhD students, and they're all in it together. So they're constantly on a daily basis working with their supervisors because they're their bosses, basically. So I think supervision is something completely different depending on the field of research you're doing.
Right.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think maybe supervision or a supervisor is raising wrong expectations, because I think step by step, coming from school, studying at university and doing a PhD, you're getting more and more independent, which is perfectly fine, and that's how it should be. But you shouldn't expect that there is someone holding your hand during these years. If you expect that, I think you could probably be a bit disappointed.
And overwhelmed.
And overwhelmed, of course. But after initial weeks and months, when you figured out how this supervising thing is going, I think you can accept it, be fine with it, and also see the positive side effects of being independent, of finding your own structure in life, in your daily routine, which is hard, but you learn a lot of these, how do you call it outside of academia? You call it soft skills, I think. And you, by doing a PhD, you get taught these things. And I think it's more like someone is there, and this person should be there to help you in difficult situations. This person should be there if you're really also coming from your discipline struggling, not also personally, only personally, but also struggling with your topic and with these things. But I think there are very good supervisions, but it's different than you expect before starting a PhD.
Yeah.
I hope I made myself clear. It's difficult to describe, but I think everyone who's doing a PhD or did it knows what I'm talking about.
And I think you're addressing also implicitly another issue that I think is very important, is the fact that when talking with doctoral candidates, a lot of the times, or when we talk about doctoral supervision, about not so good supervision experiences, a lot of the time people are thinking about the bad supervisor and the mean supervisor. And I think while this is definitely something that can happen, you can have maybe a supervisor who's not that great of a person, that might happen. But at the same time, it's obviously a dual relationship. And sometimes complications come from the expectations that doctoral students might have as to how supervision is supposed to work. And I think what you're kind of like showing a lot of how this kind of very autonomous thinking, open-minded perspective that you have is a part of what really makes this supervision relationship work.
And especially because my supervisor, I'm her first PhD candidate.
Oh,
so
wow.
Both
Okay.
of us never experienced that before.
This is nice.
So,
very nice.
Yes, and I think this is something, but I do this personally on an everyday basis. You never know what the other person is struggling with. And so maybe it's also difficult for your supervisor to find him or herself in that situation now, in a new situation. So yeah, transparency and communication are the key words.
Exactly. I mean, the relationship to your supervisor, it's just another relationship, and every relationship is based on communication. So
Exactly.
That's key.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's really nice to know that you're basically the firstborn.
Yeah.
And as you said, your supervisor has initiated a family. So obviously, we could do an interesting reading about like all this construct, and I think it sounds very promising.
I'm her academic first child.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we're finally done with our general questions. I'd like to ask each of you a couple of short questions related to your submissions, and then have some final words, and then we'll be through with it. So I would like to start with you, Hanna. As I mentioned before, you were the winner of the contest with your poem Promovere, or I don't know how you would like to...
I would say it like promovere, but it's totally fine.
Promovere, which would be the German...
rhythm of the poem.
Exactly.
The Latin word,
So, well, first of all, congratulations on this. Obviously, I think one of the reasons that we chose your submission was the genre, right? It was something that surprised us. I think we hadn't thought about somebody writing a poem on the topic. We had expected maybe essays. We thought maybe somebody would write a comic or something, but nobody was really expecting somebody come up with a poem, and kind of like a very classical sounding poem at the same time. So my first question would be, can you tell a bit about that? Why did you choose a poem, and are you an avid reader and or writer of poetry in general?
Why did I choose a poem? Because I really like these kind of poems, and I think it comes from my father, because he also writes poems like for carnival poems and presents them publicly. And yeah, I thought this would be a great way to also to, how can I say, to challenge myself to put all these informations and these experience that I have inside this kind of metric form.
Right.
And I had a lot of fun doing that, and I love the rhythm. I also love music. So yeah, I don't know why it came somehow naturally to me. And for me, poem was the closest thing to what I could do, even though if you didn't expect that, I don't know why, but it was the first thing that came to my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question is we're going back to the whole supervision relationship, and seeing that one of the issues you bring up in your poem is kind of like the balancing of free thinking with constructive criticism. May I ask if your supervisor actually had the chance to read your text, and if she gave you any feedback on it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So before handing it in, I send this poem to her, because I think it's easy to figure out who she is if you know my name. If you search in the SFB, you know who my supervisor is. And I wanted to make sure that she's fine with what I'm saying, especially because I'm mentioning that I'm a very loud person and she's more a quiet one. And I didn't want, because I think it's very positive. I like these differences, and I think you can learn from different ways of behaving, from different ways of being, and I really love that. So I wanted to make sure that she's fine with that, and I think she responded that she was kind of proud and very happy, and I have to hand it in, and yeah, really made me do it and gave the last push to hand it in, to submit it, and yes.
Okay, but you guys don't communicate with each other in verse, right?
No, only in Mittelhochdeutsch, which is medieval language. We only talk in Mittelhoch. No, of course we don't.
Very cool. Okay, my last question is a bit specific to something that called my attention in your text, or something that I thought was an interesting contrast. And it's because on the one hand, you point out the fact that science does not occur in a vacuum, but rather constitutes a knowledge continuum that you talk about. But at the same time, you use the metaphor of the Elfenbeinturm, the ivory tower, which generally indicates the opposite, the idea of being like separated from the rest of the world. So I was wondering, how do you see these elements fit together in terms of a doctoral student's research and supervision experience? So the knowledge continuum and kind of like constructing your own isolated tower.
It sounds so contrary, how do you say it? Contradictory.
Yeah, counterintuitive or...
Yeah, exactly. But it's not, because sometimes you have to be in that ivory tower. You have to concentrate on your work. You have to really concentrate on your topic, and maybe weeks and months you just have to do that. But research in general is something that does not stand for itself or work for itself. It's always in communication and it's in movement. It's always dynamic, let's say it like that. So, of course, writing about German medieval texts is not the best topic where everyone can relate to. Starting a conversation at a party, people don't stay that long with you. Maybe the most drunk one who can't move anymore, he or she is standing with you, but other ones are leaving. So sometimes you feel isolated in the way that you're concentrated and working on your project. But since I'm especially in this interdisciplinary SFB, we have a big topic that everyone is working on, and I'm not writing all these texts for myself. I'm writing these texts for people to read and to motivate other people to put their ideas and to say that maybe I'm wrong with my interpretations and maybe they have another idea to do. It's always in a discussion, and research is discussion. It's not that you are right and you found out the most important thing and now you're like the biggest star on that topic. That's not how it works, at least not for me. So yeah, it's a mix between ivory tower and dynamics and communication with other researchers.
So basically, this ivory tower that you're talking about is more kind of like this mental state in which you are to be able to come up with the ideas that you then share with the community.
Yes. You need time to go back to think about it, and then you can go out and present your ideas and stand in the storm of research discussion.
Right.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I would like to move now over to Ulrike and ask you a couple of questions concerning your text, and specifically two things. The first one, I think we've already addressed it kind of on the sidelines a couple of times as we've been talking now. But as a former PhD candidate, I'm obviously not alone in identifying with the issues you bring up in your text. This is something that Hannah also said. So more specifically, dealing with setbacks and self-doubt while working on one's dissertation. But I think what's particular about your experience is that is your process of learning to reach out for support. So the general question is, why do you think this is actually kind of like a challenge most of the times?
Imposter syndrome.
Okay, yeah.
I think all of my friends have it, like to a certain degree. All of them, even the ones who are already done with their PhDs. Like I have a really clever friend who did her PhD in biology and maths, like a combination of that. And magna cum laude, summa cum laude, what's the best? Summa cum laude, right? Exactly, that's what she got. She got the best grade. And works as a postdoc now at the university and everything. And she still doubts herself every day and thinks like, no, because I can't do anything. And, because what she struggles with is that she is not located in just one discipline. She didn't do just biology to 100% or mathematics. So sometimes there are topics or problems which she can't deal with because that's a part of mathematics that she's never dealt with. So she feels like, you know, imposter syndrome, as I said. She doesn't know anything and her PhD is not earned and all of that. And I think what I know I still struggle with every time I write an email to my supervisor, I don't get drunk, but I just, you know, it's just, you have to push send now. Because I always still have the feeling, oh, that's gonna be the time she finally figures out that I don't know shit and I shouldn't be doing a PhD. So I have many friends like that actually who just feel like what they're doing is something, but not relevant or not clever enough, or I don't know what. I mean, I still sometimes even but I have those thoughts which I know are totally idiotic. But I got a 1.3 in my master's degree here, and I sometimes still think, oh, I just got lucky. I just had a supervisor, or he just felt sad for me, or I don't know. It's ridiculous, as I said. So you don't just get a 1.3 by accident or because somebody felt bad for you. I'm aware, but I still feel like it wasn't earned. Like I just somehow got lucky, and that my supervisor. Still, every time I told her, like, I'm not sure if I can do this, blah, blah, and she was like, no, I've seen your work. I've seen your work, and you can do this, definitely. She trusts me, and then I'm just always afraid constantly to let her down in her trust in me and in my... I'm being let down by my own capabilities, I think. To just send something in, which is totally normal that she says, that's not so good, you know, maybe, like, comments and take a look at this again, just... That's completely normal. That's academic work. But every time I just think she's going to draw the line and be like, no, out.
I think that's a really good point. And now that you're talking about it, I can also relate to that very well, because I remember I also had kind of like the issue that I always felt that my supervisor had so high expectations as to what I could accomplish compared to what I thought I could accomplish. And so getting always feedback from somebody who was completely confident in you in a way that you weren't yourself, I never felt very comfortable with that.
Me neither.
And
pressure on you.
Yeah. Maybe though the important thing, and I think it's something that I never did, it's basically kind of like coming up with the courage to address these kinds of issues openly, which is something that you obviously did. And in addition, you also provided insights in your text into the dynamics of negotiation that you guys developed between you and your supervisor. So how are these elements, like proactively seeking counsel and then negotiating its terms, connected? And what can candidates and supervisors do to ensure that this contract between them eventually works out?
There has to be trust, I think. What helped me a lot was that I already knew her from the beginning. Like I took some seminars with her. She was actually my first contact person when I came here for my master's. So I knew her right from the start. So that's, I think, also where her trust in me comes from, because she knew me from right from the start. I had some seminars with her, wrote some term papers, so she knew my writing style and all that. So I think like establishing this basis of trust and communication, it's just that you have to have some, background together, which is why I find it difficult when PhD students come to a new university with a supervisor they've never worked with before, they never talked to before. And I think it's probably then when most of the problems develop, because you don't know that person. I knew my supervisor, she's very busy, she won't have that much time, but I always knew how to reach her. I knew when I would reach out, she would get back to me. So there was already this groundwork on which I could build. But if you don't have that, I believe that's probably pretty difficult.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for your really interesting answers and thoughts on the topic. Are there any last minute ideas or words of wisdom that you have for any doctoral candidates out there who might be listening to us, or potential doctoral candidates? Or
try it. If you want to do it, try it.
Right.
And I mean, this is maybe not the most motivating thing, but you can always stop doing things. You are a free person, so try it if you feel ready for it. It's a time where you can really self-develop in this time. You do it for yourself, especially in humanities. You usually don't do it for your career, or maybe it's
No.
yeah. So you do it for yourself, and if you're really excited, if you want to experience a time like that, try it. You can still stop doing it whenever you want, and it's nothing about failing. It's just another door that has opened for you in your life. You can close it, you can leave it open, but try it. That's what I would suggest.
Wow, that's actually very inspiring, especially the fact of being very aware that one can quit whenever one wants. I think a lot of people feel kind of like trapped in their projects at some point, and I think it's a good thing to start by thinking or by knowing that it's something that you just can try out like a job, and then if you don't like your job after 1 or 2 years, you can always stop and just go for something different. So yeah, well, thank you so much, both of you, for your time. We're finishing this in the middle of yet another summer storm outside. I hope it stops before we all leave the building. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I think it was really fun talking to you guys. I'm looking forward to publishing this conversation, and I will let you know once that happens. So thank you, and thank you everybody who might listen to this at some point in the future. Goodbye.
Thanks to you. Bye.